Marcus Rodriguez pulled his pickup truck into the rest stop parking lot, the afternoon sun beating down on the cracked asphalt. The drive from Phoenix to Denver was a long one, and his old Ford needed a break as much as he did. The radiator had been running hot for the last 50 miles, and he knew better than to push it further. 20 years in the Marine Corps had taught him that ignoring warning signs usually led to bigger problems. He stepped out of the truck and stretched his back, feeling the familiar ache in his left shoulder where shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone in Fallujah. The injury had ended his military career, but it also saved his life in ways he was still discovering. These days, he worked construction in Phoenix. Good, honest work that kept his hands busy and his mind focused on the future instead of the past. The rest stop was one of those generic highway facilities that dotted Interstate 25. All concrete and steel with a few picnic tables scattered around for travelers brave enough to eat lunch in the desert heat. A handful of cars were parked in the lot, their owners either inside the restrooms or grabbing snacks from the vending machines. Marcus walked toward the building, planning to buy a cold drink and check his truck's coolant level before getting back on the road. That's when he noticed the girl. She was standing beside a white Honda Civic parked near the far edge of the lot, away from the other vehicles. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. She appeared to be in her early 20s, dressed in jeans and a blue tank top, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. But something about her posture caught Marcus's attention. She was standing too straight, too still, like a soldier at attention. Her arms were positioned at her sides in a way that looked casual but felt wrong. Marcus had spent 2 decades reading body language and situational awareness. In Iraq and Afghanistan, the ability to spot something out of place had meant the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. That same instinct was screaming at him now. Even though he couldn't immediately identify why, he changed direction, walking slower now, using his peripheral vision to study the scene. The girl's car was positioned oddly, angled so that it faced away from the main building. There was a man standing on the other side of the vehicle, partially hidden by the open driver's door. Marcus could see just enough of him to note that he was older, maybe mid-40s, wearing khakis and a polo shirt. Nothing threatening about that, but Marcus's gut told him otherwise. As he got closer, Marcus realized what had triggered his alert. The girl was using her hands to tap against her leg in a pattern. 3 quick taps, followed by 3 slower ones. Then 3 quick again. Tap dash tap dash tap, 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 tap. She was repeating it over and over. Mechanical and precise. SOS. Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. The girl was signaling for help using Morse code, probably hoping that someone in the busy rest stop would recognize the pattern. The fact that she knew the code suggested either military training or someone who had prepared for exactly this kind of situation. Either way, she was in trouble. He forced himself to keep walking at the same casual pace, not wanting to alert the man by the car that anyone had noticed anything unusual. Marcus pulled out his phone and pretended to check messages while positioning himself behind a concrete pillar. That gave him a better view of the situation. From this angle, he could see the man more clearly. The guy was older than Marcus had first thought, probably in his 50s, with graying hair and soft features that suggested he spent more time behind a desk than outdoors. He was talking to the girl in what appeared to be a normal conversation, but Marcus could see tension in both their postures. The man kept looking around the parking lot, checking for observers. While the girl continued her subtle distress signal, Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. This could be a domestic situation, an abusive boyfriend or husband who had the girl trapped. It could be something worse. Either way, the girl was clearly asking for help, and Marcus wasn't about to ignore that request. He studied the tactical situation with the methodical approach that had kept him alive in combat zones. The man appeared unarmed, at least no visible weapons, but that didn't mean much. The girl looked physically unharmed but obviously distressed. There were other people around, but none of them seemed to have noticed anything unusual. The rest stop's security was minimal, just whatever staff might be working inside. Marcus knew he needed more information before making a move. Acting too quickly could escalate the situation and put the girl in more danger. But waiting too long could mean missing the opportunity to help entirely. He needed to get closer without being obvious about it. He walked toward his truck, which was parked 3 spaces away from the Honda, and popped the hood. The radiator was indeed running hot, steam rising from under the cap, so his actions looked completely natural. While pretending to examine his engine, Marcus strained to hear the conversation between the girl and the man. "I told you. Sarah, we need to get going," the man was saying, his voice carrying just enough for Marcus to pick up the words. "Your mother is expecting us." "I know, Uncle Tom," the girl replied, but there was something flat about her tone, like she was reading lines from a script. "I just need to use the restroom first." Uncle Tom, that could be legitimate. But Marcus had learned in the Marines that human traffickers often use family relationships as cover stories. Real uncles didn't usually require their nieces to signal for help in Morse code. The girl's use of his name also felt forced, like she was establishing his identity for any potential witnesses. "You used the bathroom at the last stop," the man said. And now Marcus could hear irritation creeping into his voice. "We don't have time for this." "Please," Sarah said, and this time her voice cracked slightly. "I really need to go." The man looked around the parking lot again, his gaze sweeping past Marcus without seeming to notice him. Marcus kept his head down, tinkering with his radiator cap while listening intently. "5 minutes," the man finally said. "Then we leave whether you're ready or not?" Sarah nodded and started walking toward the restroom building. But Marcus noticed that she took an indirect route, staying as far away from the man as possible. As she passed close to his position, she made eye contact with Marcus for just a brief moment. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she mouthed the word "help" so quietly that he almost missed it. That was all the confirmation Marcus needed. This wasn't a family road trip gone wrong. This was an abduction, and Sarah was a victim who had managed to signal for assistance. Now the question was what to do about it. Marcus's military training kicked in automatically. First priority was gathering intelligence and establishing communications. Second was developing a tactical plan that prioritized the victim's safety. Third was execution, with backup plans ready in case the situation went sideways. He closed his truck's hood and walked casually toward the rest stop building, timing his movement to arrive at the entrance just as Sarah was coming out. The man by the car was watching, but Marcus made sure his approach looked coincidental. "Excuse me, miss," Marcus said as they crossed paths near the door. "I think you dropped this." He handed her a piece of paper he had torn from a notebook in his truck with his phone number written on it. To anyone watching, it would look like he was returning something she had lost. Sarah took the paper with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, then louder. "I'm always losing things." "If you need anything," Marcus said meaningfully, "anything at all. That number works 24 hours a day." She nodded once, quickly, then walked back toward the white Honda. Marcus could see the man watching them both, his expression suspicious but not yet alarmed. Sarah had played her part perfectly, making the interaction look natural and innocent. Marcus bought a cold drink from the vending machine and returned to his truck, but he didn't get in. Instead, he positioned himself where he could see both the Honda and the rest stop exit, using his phone to call 911 while keeping the conversation quiet. 911, what's your emergency?" "I need to report a possible abduction in progress," Marcus said, keeping his voice low. "Interstate 25, Cactus Creek rest stop, southbound side." White Honda Civic license plate. He squinted at the car and read off the numbers. "Sir, what makes you think it's an abduction?" Marcus quickly explained about the SOS signal and Sarah's obvious distress. The dispatcher promised to send units immediately, but Marcus knew it would take time for police to arrive. Rural rest stops weren't exactly high-priority patrol areas. He watched as the man became increasingly agitated, checking his watch repeatedly and scanning the parking lot. Sarah had gotten back into the car but left her door open, continuing her subtle resistance. The man said something to her, his body language becoming more aggressive. That's when Marcus saw the man grab Sarah's arm, yanking her toward him. She tried to pull away, but he tightened his grip. Even from a distance, Marcus could see her wince in pain. The situation was escalating, and police were still minutes away. Marcus had to make a decision. He could wait for backup and hope the situation didn't get worse, or he could act now with the skills and training that had served him in combat. 20 years in the Marines had taught Marcus Rodriguez many things. But the most important lesson was simple. When good people see evil happening, they have a moral obligation to win. The man's hand tightened on Sarah's arm like a vice, his knuckles white with tension. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, weighing options and looking for an escape route. This was the most dangerous moment in any tactical situation, when a cornered enemy had to choose between fight and flight. "I don't know what you think is happening here," the man said, his voice steady but strained. "But this is a family matter. Sarah is my niece and we need to get going." Marcus took a small step closer, close enough now that he could move quickly if needed. His body language remained relaxed, but every muscle was coiled and ready. 20 years of military training had taught him that appearing calm while being fully prepared for violence was often the key to avoiding it. "I'm sure you understand my concern," Marcus replied, his tone conversational. "See, I couldn't help but notice that Sarah here has been practicing her Morse code. That's unusual for a family road trip, wouldn't you say?" The man's face went completely white. He had been banking on the fact that most people wouldn't recognize the SOS signal, and certainly wouldn't act on it if they did. Finding himself face to face with someone who not only understood military communications but was willing to intervene had clearly not been part of his plan. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. But his voice cracked slightly on the words. Sarah was looking back and forth between the two men, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. She was smart enough to stay quiet and let Marcus handle the situation. But Marcus could see that she was ready to run if an opportunity presented itself. "Sarah," Marcus said gently, keeping his eyes locked on the man, "I want you to walk over to that red truck there and wait by the driver's door. If anything happens, anything at all, you get in that truck and lock the doors. The keys are on the front seat." "She's not going anywhere," the man said, his grip tightening even more. Sarah gasped in pain, and Marcus felt his jaw clench. "Sir," Marcus said. And now his voice carried the unmistakable authority of a Marine who had led men in combat. "You're going to let go of that girl's arm right now, or this situation is going to become very unpleasant for you." "You don't understand," the man said desperately. "She's troubled. She runs away from home, makes up stories. Her family sent me to bring her back." It was a clever lie, the kind that might work on someone who hadn't spent years dealing with human intelligence and psychological operations. But Marcus had interrogated enough insurgents to recognize desperation when he heard it. More importantly, he had seen the genuine terror in Sarah's eyes. "If that's true," Marcus said reasonably, "then you won't mind if we call her family right now and confirm that story. Sarah, what's your mother's phone number?" The man's eyes darted around the parking lot, looking for any avenue of escape. There were more people around now, travelers stopping for bathroom breaks and snacks. But none of them had noticed the tense confrontation happening near the white Honda to casual observers. It probably looked like a normal family discussion. "We don't have time for phone calls," the man said. "Her mother is expecting us hours ago." "Then she must be worried sick," Marcus replied. "I'm sure she'd be relieved to hear that Sarah is safe. Hand me your phone, and we'll call her right now." Marcus knew he was backing the man into a corner, but that was the point. Every lie led to more complications, more chances for the truth to come out. Meanwhile, the 911 call he had made earlier should be bringing police backup soon. He just needed to keep the situation stable until they arrived. "Look, friend," the man said, trying a different approach, "I appreciate your concern, but this is really none of your business. We have a long drive ahead of us and we need to get going." He started pulling Sarah toward the car's open door, clearly intending to force her inside and drive away. That's when Marcus decided that the diplomatic approach had run its course. He moved with the speed and precision that had made him a successful Marine Scout sniper. One moment he was standing 3 feet away, the next he had the man's wrist in a grip that could snap bones if necessary. The technique was called a compliance hold, designed to inflict enough pain to gain cooperation without causing permanent damage. "Let go of the girl," Marcus said quietly. Applying just enough pressure to make his point clear, the man released Sarah immediately, his face contorting with pain. She stumbled backward, rubbing her arm where his fingers had left red marks on her skin. "Sarah," Marcus said without looking away from the man, "go to my truck now. Lock the doors and don't open them for anyone except uniformed police officers." She didn't need to be told twice. Sarah ran across the parking lot toward Marcus's red Ford, her sandals slapping against the hot asphalt. Marcus heard the truck door slam and the locks engage, which meant she was safe for the moment. "You're making a big mistake," the man said through gritted teeth. "When the police get here, they're going to arrest you for assault." "Maybe," Marcus acknowledged, maintaining his grip. "But they're also going to run Sarah's name through the missing persons database. And they're going to run your name through the sex offender registry. And they're going to search your car for zip ties, duct tape, and anything else you might have planned to use on that girl." The man's face went from white to green. Marcus had hit the target with that last comment, which confirmed what he already suspected. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime of opportunity. This was planned, organized, and that made it infinitely more serious. "I want you to listen very carefully," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that only the man could hear. "I spent 15 years in Marine Force reconnaissance. I've tracked terrorists through mountains in Afghanistan and insurgents through cities in Iraq. If you try to run, I will catch you. If you try to hurt that girl, I will stop you. And if you try to pull out any weapon you might have hidden on your person, I will put you on the ground so hard that they'll need to identify you with dental records. Do we understand each other?" The man nodded frantically, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the shade they were standing in. Marcus could see that the fight had gone out of him completely. Without Sarah as a hostage, he had no leverage and no options except to hope that he could somehow talk his way out of the situation. "Good," Marcus said, releasing the pressure on the man's wrist but keeping hold of it. "Now we're going to walk over to that picnic table and sit down like civilized people while we wait for the police to arrive. You're going to keep your hands where I can see them. And you're going to answer some questions truthfully." They walked the 20 feet to the nearest concrete table, Marcus maintaining control of the man's wrist the entire time. To anyone watching, it probably looked like he was helping someone who had stumbled or twisted an ankle. The subtlety was important because Marcus didn't want to create a scene that might spook other potential victims in the area. As they sat down, Marcus positioned himself so he could see both the man and his truck where Sarah was waiting. He could see her silhouette in the driver's seat, and knowing she was secure allowed him to focus completely on the threat in front of him. "What's your real name?" Marcus asked. "Tom Brennan," the man replied automatically, then immediately looked like he regretted sharing that information. "And Sarah isn't your niece." It wasn't a question, and Tom didn't try to deny it. "No. How long have you been planning this?" Tom's eyes darted around the parking lot again, but there was nowhere to run. Marcus had positioned himself to block any escape route, and even if he somehow got away, his car was still here with whatever evidence might be inside it. "I want a lawyer," Tom said finally. Marcus smiled grimly. "You can have as many lawyers as you want once the police get here. But right now, you're going to help me understand what you were planning to do to that girl?" The sound of sirens in the distance caught both men's attention. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. Backup was finally arriving, which meant he could hand the situation over to law enforcement and focus on making sure Sarah was okay. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus told Tom as the sirens grew louder. "When those police officers arrive, you're going to tell them exactly what you told me. You're going to admit that Sarah isn't your niece and that you were trying to take her somewhere against her will. You're going to cooperate fully with their investigation. And if you're very lucky, they might not charge you with kidnapping on top of whatever else they find." "Why would I do that?" Tom asked desperately. Marcus leaned closer, his voice taking on the hard edge that had once terrified insurgents in dusty Iraqi interrogation rooms. "Because if you don't, I'm going to make it my personal mission to ensure that every detail of this encounter finds its way to the right people. I know how the system works, and I know how to make sure that predators like you don't slip through the cracks. Two police cruisers pulled into the rest stop, parking lot with lights flashing but sirens now silent. Marcus could see the officers assessing the scene as they approached, hands resting on their weapons but not drawn. He raised his free hand to show that he wasn't armed and posed no threat. "Officers," Marcus called out as they came within speaking distance. "I'm the one who called 911 about the possible abduction." This man was trying to force that girl into his car against her will. She signaled for help using Morse code. The Miranda rights echoed across the parking lot as Sergeant Martinez cuffed Tom Brennan and placed him in the back of her patrol car. Marcus watched the arrest with the satisfaction of a mission accomplished, but he knew the real work was just beginning. Sarah was safe for now, but there were still questions that needed answers. Detective Ray Castellanos arrived 20 minutes later, a tall man in his 40s with graying hair and the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much of humanity's dark side. He introduced himself to Marcus and spent several minutes taking detailed notes about the initial encounter and Marcus's observations. "You did good work here," Detective Castellanos told Marcus as they watched. The crime scene technicians photographed Tom's Honda. Most people would have walked right past that SOS signal without thinking twice about it. Most people haven't. "Spent 20 years in the Marines," Marcus replied. "You learn to pay attention to things that don't fit the normal pattern." While the detective conducted his preliminary interviews, Marcus sat with Sarah on a bench outside the rest stop building. She had agreed to come out of the truck once Tom was secured in the police car, but she stayed close to Marcus, clearly drawing comfort from his presence. "How did you know Morse code?" Marcus asked gently. Sarah managed a small smile for the first time since he had noticed her distress signal. "My grandfather taught me when I was little. He was in the Navy during World War II, served on destroyers in the Pacific. He said every young person should know how to call for help when words weren't enough." "Smart grandfather," Marcus said. "That knowledge saved your life today?" The full story emerged slowly over the next hour, pieced together through Sarah's interview with Detective Castellanos and the evidence found in Tom's car. Sarah Hamilton was 22 years old, a college student from Colorado Springs who had been driving to visit her sister in Albuquerque. She had stopped at this same rest stop 2 hours earlier to use the bathroom and grab a snack. Tom Brennan had been waiting in the parking lot, watching for lone female travelers. He had followed Sarah into the rest stop building and somehow managed to drug her coffee while she was distracted. The drug was mild enough that she remained conscious but left her confused and compliant. Tom had then approached her in the parking lot, claiming to be a family friend sent to pick her up because her car had broken down. In her drugged state, Sarah had been unable to resist effectively, but she retained enough awareness to realize she was in danger. The Morse code signal had been a desperate attempt to communicate with the outside world when direct resistance seemed impossible. "The drug is called GHB," Detective Castellanos explained to Marcus privately. "It's colorless and nearly tasteless, which makes it perfect for predators like Brennan. In small doses, it makes victims compliant and confused. In larger doses, it can cause unconsciousness or even death." The search of Tom's car revealed a disturbing collection of items: zip ties, DUC tape, a roll of plastic sheeting, and a bottle of chloroform. Most damning of all was a notebook containing detailed observations about the rest stop and notes about the travel patterns of lone female drivers. Tom had been planning this crime for weeks, possibly months. This wasn't his first time, Detective Castellanos told Marcus grimly. "We're going to be looking at missing persons cases across 3 states to see if we can link him to other disappearances." As the investigation continued, Marcus learned more about Sarah's background. She was a pre-med student at the University of Colorado, studying to become a pediatric nurse. She had lost both parents in a car accident 3 years earlier and was putting herself through school while caring for her younger sister. The trip to Albuquerque was supposed to be a brief visit before the start of the fall semester. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been here," Sarah said as they waited for her sister to arrive from Albuquerque. If you hadn't recognized the signal, if you hadn't been willing to get involved? Marcus had been thinking about the same thing, and the possibilities made his stomach turn. Tom's preparations suggested that he had been planning to take Sarah somewhere remote, somewhere she would never be found. The timeline was horrifying to consider. But I was here, Marcus said firmly. And more importantly, you were smart enough to signal for help and brave enough to trust that someone would understand. A lot of people in your situation would have panicked or given up hope. Detective Castellanos returned with an update on Tom's background check. The news was worse than any of them had expected. Tom Brennan was indeed a registered sex offender with convictions in 2 different states. He had served time for aggravated assault and attempted kidnapping, but had been released early for good behavior. The system had failed, and Sarah had nearly paid the price. He violated his parole by leaving Arizona without permission, the detective explained. Even without the attempted kidnapping charge, he's looking at several years in prison. With the evidence we've gathered here today, plus what we might find when we search his apartment, he'll be going away for a very long time. Sarah's sister Maria arrived just as the sun was setting, her face streaked with tears as she ran across the parking lot to embrace Sarah. The reunion was emotional and intense, both sisters crying as they held each other tight. Marcus watched from a respectful distance, remembering his own family reunions after dangerous deployments overseas. I can't believe this happened, Maria said through her tears. I can't believe some stranger saved my sister's life. He's not a stranger, Sarah said, looking over at Marcus with obvious gratitude. He's a hero. Marcus felt uncomfortable with the label, as he always did when people tried to call him a hero. He had simply done what any decent person would do in the same situation. The real heroes were people like Sarah, who had the presence of mind to signal for help in a terrifying situation, and people like her grandfather, who had taken the time to teach a young girl skills that would one day save her life. Detective Castellanos wrapped up the preliminary investigation as darkness fell over the rest stop. Tom would be transferred to the county jail and held without bail pending his arraignment. Sarah would need to give additional testimony in the coming weeks. But for now, she was free to go home with her sister. Mr. Rodriguez, the detective said as he shook Marcus's hand, I want you to know that what you did here today represents the absolute best of human nature. Sarah Hamilton is alive tonight because you were paying attention and because you were willing to act on what you saw. As the police cars and emergency vehicles finally cleared the parking lot, Marcus found himself alone with Sarah and Maria beside his truck. The radiator problem that had brought him to this rest stop in the first place seemed trivial now compared to what had transpired. I don't know how to thank you, Sarah said, her voice still shaky from the day's events. You don't need to thank me, Marcus replied. Just promise me that you'll be extra careful from now on, and maybe consider carrying pepper spray or taking a self-defense class. The world has too many predators like Tom Brennan. Sarah nodded earnestly. I will, and I'm going to make sure every woman I know learns. Morse code for SOS. If my grandfather's lesson can save one other person the way it saved me today, then something good will have come from this nightmare. Marcus watched the sisters drive away in Maria's car, Sarah's Honda remaining behind as evidence for the ongoing investigation. He finally got his own truck started and pulled back onto Interstate 25, continuing his journey toward Denver. But his mind kept returning to the events at the rest stop and the chain of circumstances that had brought him to the right place at the right time. The next morning, Marcus woke up in his Denver hotel room to find his phone buzzing with messages. The story had somehow made its way to the local news, with headlines about a Marine hero saves college student. The attention made him uncomfortable, but he understood that stories like this served an important purpose. They reminded people to stay alert, to watch out for each other, and to trust their instincts when something didn't feel right. More importantly, the publicity generated tips that helped Detective Castellanos link Tom Brennan to at least 3 other missing persons cases across the Southwest. 2 women who had disappeared from similar rest stops over the past year were found, buried in shallow graves near Tom's Arizona property. A third woman, missing for 6 months, was discovered alive but traumatized in a storage unit that Tom had been renting under a false name. The ripple effects of Sarah's rescue continued to spread over the following weeks. Law enforcement agencies across multiple states began coordinating their efforts to track down other predators using similar methods. Rest stop security was increased, and new awareness campaigns educated travelers about the warning signs of human trafficking and abduction. Sarah herself became an advocate for victim awareness and self-defense training. She started a nonprofit organization called Signal for Hope that taught Morse code SOS signals to women across the country. The simple 333 pattern that her grandfather had taught her as a child became a widespread symbol of resistance against predators. Marcus returned to his construction work in Phoenix, but he found that the encounter had changed him in subtle but important ways. He paid even more attention to his surroundings, watched for people,